Hey man, this is Chilly Billy, back on the moon today. Pretty calm in this cold, but it was white capping about 30 minutes ago on the other end, so you just never know. But anyway, today I've been thinking about the book of Job, God's magnificence, man, I can't even speak, and addiction and poetry. And imagine I, do our Bible study every morning. And anyway, I had to read the other day Job 38 through 42, the last 5 books of Job, the oldest book in the Bible. And though in most of those words, God is talking to Job about God. And, the Bible's written by 40 some odd people. And even though most of us believe it is the inspired word of God, still it is very lyrical, poetic, beautiful language. And Job, I remember Michael Card, theologically inclined musician, Christian musician that's my favorite, that I got turned on to back in the 80s, said that the book of Job really wasn't about the suffering of Job, but really about the greatness of God. And Job chapter 38 through 42 is God talking to Job about who he is and how little Job understands him. And at the very end, Job basically says, I put my hand over my mouth, I know nothing. Kind of similar to how Thomas Aquinas, who wrote the Summa Theologica, one of the greatest treatise volumes on theology ever written, and he had some kind of experience with God at the end of his life, didn't finish it, and just said he had really nothing left to say, because I think when we encounter God in a big way, we just realize how little our words matter, though our words do matter. But anyway, Job, it goes through all of this. Job's suffering, his friends are giving him advice, and finally God kind of has enough, and he said, and it says that God answered Job out of the whirlwind, and he's just like, who is this who questions my wisdom? And one of the versions I just think has the most beautiful language. It says, who is this that darkens my counsel? I mean, how can any poetry be more beautiful or realistic or relevant than that? And he says, who is this that darkens my counsel with such ignorant words? Brace yourself like a man. I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Where were you when, he goes on, he created the earth, he laid the foundation, and it's just powerful, but it's God just talking about who he is and how little we know him. And I've kind of done a deep dive into a type of theology lately, looking at what's called cataphatic and apophatic. And cataphatic is just the things that describe God, and apophatic is all that God is not, because his essence is so far beyond the energies and the outcomes that we see. So in understanding who God is and also who he isn't, we get a better understanding of who he is. But I think we just really don't know who he is. But the way God talks to Job is just incredible. I would encourage anybody to read 38 through 42, and you just get a better picture of who God is. And but just the poetry of the Bible, and even though I believe it's all inspired, it's not all exactly literal. Some of it's metaphorical, allegorical, but it still is truth and embodies truth. But I was thinking today, imagine I were reading, and we were reading, I think it was maybe one of the Malachi's I'd written about extremism, and then we were reading in Revelation about the church of Laodicea when Jesus was talking to John on Patmos and the Revelation, and said he really admonished the church of Laodicea for being lukewarm. He said, I'd rather you be hot or cold. And somehow I tied that to addiction. In addiction, we're extremists. We're hot, we're cold, we're high, we're not, we're coming down. But also we get sometimes maybe being hot or cold. Even if you're cold, you may realize you're cold and want to get hot. And even though we in addiction deal with extremes, still extremes are not good as a rule. But if hot water and cold water come together and they create lukewarm water. Well, it's useful for many things, but a lukewarm Christian or a lukewarm person, it's just, we are void of passion. And even though that may sound like a strange connection with addiction, but being lukewarm, sometimes we don't even realize where we are because we're just comfortable because we're not hot or cold. But sometimes hot or cold is necessary to get us off center. And I was thinking about the being kind of like being an addict is like being in a boat without a paddle. Now we've got the hot and cold in that we're, or at least me, manic, and we're twirling, we're spinning, and we're high, we're not high, we're whatever, but we're in this boat, we have no paddle, we're not controlling anything, so we are kind of lukewarm, just drifting through life, not realizing anything other than the fact that just in our tiny bubble, we're all upset and we're just run from one extreme to the other. But somehow just the boat just going along with the current, we aren't controlling any of our destiny, and we aren't controlling any part of our life. And to me, that's kind of like being lukewarm. It's better to be hot or cold because you recognize maybe you're on an extreme and you may do something to maybe not be extreme. But anyway, I know that's a lot of, I don't even know if I'll end up sharing this, but I was just thinking about just how magnificent God is, and I love how he describes himself to Job in the book of Job, which is the oldest book. And then I was thinking about being lukewarm. Lukewarm is often we're just without passion. And so somewhere in all that mix, there may be a nugget of truth, and then maybe there isn't. So you got to take what I say with a grain of tough salt. Anyway, cheers.